Welcome to Eat, Sleep, Wine, Repeat, a podcast for all you wine lovers who, if you're like me, just cannot get enough of the good stuff. I'm Janina, your host, brand ambassador, wine educator, and sommelier. So stick with me as we dive deeper into this ever-evolving, wonderful world of wine. And wherever you are listening to this, cheers to you. Hello, wine friends, and welcome back to today's wonderfully geeky and genuinely fascinating episode. By the end of this conversation, you are going to come away with a much clearer understanding of the real differences between Barolo and Barbaresco beyond the usual shortcuts. Fresh inspiration for what to drink next if you love the grape behind these wines, that's Nebbiolo, including where to find brilliance and value right now, and a much deeper appreciation for why Nebbiolo remains one of the most compelling and misunderstood grapes in the world. Do you know Nebbiolo has many different biotypes? We are going to cover a few of the main ones today. And what about the communes, the crus, and the 181 MGAs? Do not worry. If this makes no sense, it will soon, as today's guest, Ian D'Agata, is widely regarded as the authority on Italian wine. He was named Italy's best wine journalist by the Comitato Grandi Crus d'Italia. He's a regular contributor to Decanter and International Wine Cellar, and is the award-winning author of several very essential books, including Native Wine Grapes of Italy and the Eco Guide to the Best Wines of Italy. So, get ready to understand deeper that Barbaresco is not simply a softer Barolo, and make sure you stay until the end because I've got a really special offer for you, some tickets to give away courtesy of the lovely Ian himself. So pour yourself a glass, settle in, and enjoy the episode. Well, Ian, we can't have a Barolo and a Barbaresco episode without me asking you what drew you to these regions. What brought you there?
You know, I grew up in a family of people who liked wine. My father, my mother, they weren't experts, but they liked wine. However, my father was a psychiatrist, and he'd seen too many families destroyed by alcoholism. And so he didn't really want us to drink on an everyday basis. So we never had wine at home. And the only time I ever tasted it was when they were having parties. But, you know, if you invite 20 or 30 people, you're not really opening
Not the good stuff.
expensive stuff. You're hopefully opening up decent wines. So there was nothing, even though I tried it on those occasions, nothing really that really struck any chords. And then instead, because my father did have a cellar, he was a doctor and, like I said, a psychiatrist, and he got a lot of gifts and he bought the stuff also from time to time. One day, my friends came over to swim at the pool, and I was in Canada. Canadians love to drink. And in fact, two of my friends had parents who worked at very important wine collections, and they wanted to drink, and they asked me to pick an Italian red wine. And I didn't really know what I was doing, but I went down to the cellar. My father had always talked about Barolo and Gattinara, and I found the Barolo, and I really believe in destiny, and destiny guided my hand. And I took a really great bottle from a great producer, 1971 vintage, which you and I could have made a great wine that year by reading a manual. It was one of the century vintages. And it was great. You know, I tasted this thing for the first time. I had never tasted anything quite like it. I always joke around that it was one of those life-defining moments when little angels come down from the sky playing the harp and girls in bikini everywhere, you know, for a 17 or 18-year-old, it's a big deal. So I was really happy. I was very happy. And I waited for my dad to come home that day. And I said, hey, Dad, we got to go talk into the kitchen because I got something to tell you. And he was really worried because we went into the kitchen. There was a problem. And I said, no, I just took one of your bottles. I know you don't want me to, but I want to start drinking. And I want to start reading about wine and learning about it. And he said, yeah, fine. Don't ever get drunk on me. And if not, I'll be disappointed. And I said, no, fine. Never been drunk once in my life. I've been studying and writing about it ever since.
And oh my God, so this, when I didn't expect you to say the first real, true fine wine you had was a Barolo and that was it. But, well, let's talk about Nebbiolo because there is something stunning, beautiful, ethereal. What is it about the grape variety Nebbiolo and I guess even these two regions that's fascinated you for the 30 years of your studying?
I think I love wine grapes. I've made it in my life. And I think each grape has its own beauty, has its own mystique. You can like Monet, other people can like Renoir, Kandinsky, Picasso, Hopper. They're all great artists, but they're very different. And so each grape has a story to tell. Depending on where you grow it, even more stories to tell. I think what makes Nebbiolo so appealing to me and many, many other people in the world is it has just a unique set of aromas and flavors that people just gravitate to. So these amazing aromas of red rose, pink rose, but definitely the rose, very intense and a good Barolo. Sour red cherry, but it's a sultry red cherry. It's almost a candied red cherry, and it's really beautiful. And it's got delicate spices like cinnamon and nutmeg. Nebbiolo wines don't smell of oak. Don't smell of cocoa and coffee and green bell pepper. If those are there, it's for other reasons. So it's a very unique profile. It's also a profile that will change depending on where you plant Nebbiolo. And that's the other great thing about Nebbiolo. All grape varieties can translate the habitat they live in the glass. But there's no doubt that some grapes do it better than others. And Nebbiolo and Pinot Noir and Riesling certainly will do that. Other grapes, like Cabernet Sauvignon and Merlot, they tend to dominate the area they grow in. And you recognize Cabernet first and the area later. It doesn't mean that they don't translate it. Of course they do. A Cabernet Sauvignon from Sonoma is very different from one from Napa. One from Margaux is going to be different from one from Pauillac. But it's less marked. While with Pinot Noir and Nebbiolo and Riesling, you just plant the thing 100 feet away and it's already a totally different ballgame.
And I guess that's the thing. That's what probably sucks me into wine. Every bottle is different. And then especially when you realize the grape and terroir, you become a grape hunter, terroir hunter, don't you?
Well, absolutely, Janina. I always say, the great thing about wine is that it isn't a soft drink and it shouldn't be. Now, I have the utmost respect for soft drinks and I love a cold Coca-Cola on a hot summer day, better with rum and lemon. But I'm just trying to say, on a cold day, it's great. It really is. But it's always the same. You buy it in Melbourne, you buy it in Pretoria, you buy it in Sao Paulo, you buy it in New York, you buy it in Rome. It follows a recipe, and it has to be always the same thing. That's what that sells. But wine doesn't sell that, or it shouldn't sell that. And I think it's very wrong when people make it like that. Wine is not an industrial product and should not be made with a recipe. And that's just for a cheap financial gain, but we shouldn't really accept that.
Well, here. Now, I mean, you have written over 20 books on Italian wine and wines of the world. Of course, we're focusing very specifically on Nebbiolo today, but how do you personally keep finding new angles to explore?
Well, I think first of all, the best thing about wine is the people, right? I mean,
yes,
sure, tasting the wine is great, but all my best memories of wine, I don't know about you, Janina, but for me, the best thing about wine is the people I had the wines with.
Yeah.
For example, I remember a dinner I had 10 or 11 years ago. I may not remember exactly what the wines tasted like. I remember they were good, but I don't remember now if they smelled of black pepper or white pepper. But I would remember the people I had them with. And I remember it was a great thing. So, it's the same thing, Nebbiolo and Barolo and Barbaresco. There's many different producers. Each one has a story to tell. Each one has a different background. Each one sees life in a different way. And I think that's what makes it so interesting. Every time I go to a winery and I sit down with people, I meet new people, usually very interesting people, fun people. I just like to listen to people. I used to be a medical doctor, and you can make a case that all doctors do is listen. And so I'm a good listener and I love to listen. And you can tell a lot from people by listening. And I just I get a kick out of that. I really do.
Beautiful. Well, as much as I'd like to now start saying, let's tell me about your favorite people, I've got to keep it to grapes. So before we get into Nebbiolo, I want you, because Italian grapes, Italian wine is your specialty. What is your favorite lesser known native grape of Northern Italy? Just in case somebody wanted to really go and explore something a little crazier.
Of a reasonably easy to find grape in wine, I would probably say Grignolino for a red wine. Grignolino
Ooh.
from Piedmont is a little bit of a difficult grape because it gives you a tannic, high acid wine, not much color, but it's just delightful. You can chill it delicately. It's perfect on a hot summer day. It goes very well with light antipasti or light meat dishes because it's got acidity. It'll go well with anything from tacos to fried bell peppers. So I love Grignolino. I really do.
Wow.
It's my one of my favorite wines.
Okay, and I have never had one. And this would be an 100% Grignolino if you hunt it down.
By European law, anytime you have a
Mm.
variety name on a label, it can be 85 to 15%. The best are always mono variety, but sometimes they put in a little Barbera or they put in a little something else. Grignolino's got tough tannins, so putting in Barbera, which is a
Just to
virtually
soften it.
tannin-less grape, absolutely, it makes it
Mm.
softer. So it's not a bad idea. But there's
Okay.
other grapes I like, but Grignolino is really something I love.
Okay, what about your favorite lesser known native grape from the southern part of Italy?
Lesser known grape. I'll give you a really lesser known grape. I'll give you
Oh,
a really geek answer now.
yeah.
There's a grape called Semidano, Semidano. Semidano in Sardinia. There's only probably about 10 hectares left of the poor thing, if that much. It's a great white grape. It gives really Sardinia's and some of Italy's best white wines, but the problem is it's very difficult to grow. It doesn't produce much. It's easily diseased. So clearly farmers who have to make a living. And for us, it's a lot of fun and we have fun and it's a social thing. But, for somebody who has to make a living, Semidano is a real pain. So it's really struggling. But I love the wines. They're honeyed, they're thick, they're rich. They can be aged in oak. They can be stainless steel aged. So I love Semidano. Now, Semidano's tough. You can only go to Sardinia and try one. So that makes it a little tough. So if I have to say something a bit more easy to pick and find from some southern Italy, a rare grape from southern Italy.
Yeah, you got to make it rare.
No, there's not. I think Malvasia di Lipari. Malvasia di Lipari is a Malvasia. Italy has 18 different 1/8 different Malvasias, and they're mostly unrelated. This is one that grows on the Lipari or Aeolian Islands, or supposedly the god Aeolus used to live. In fact, it's a very windy area. You reach the islands by hydrofoil, but on some days you can't get back to the mainland because there's just too much wind. And the islands are beautiful. They're a world-class tourist destination, and they're dotted with these beautiful little vineyards. They make this slightly aromatic, classically dry, or late harvest sweet wine, and it's beautiful. Maybe it's just also the magic of the place. It's so beautiful that you can't help but falling in love with the wine or anybody else who walks
Uh-huh.
around. So you got to be careful when you go.
Well, now you've gone to my next question, which is we're not talking about quality of wine.
Mhm.
Do you have a favorite wine region in Italy that is purely it's because of beauty, the most beautiful
Yeah.
wine region in your opinion?
Yeah, for me, it's the Val d'Aosta. The Val d'Aosta is Italy's smallest region. It's tucked up in the north western corner of Italy on the border with France and Switzerland. It's high up in the Alps, and the vineyards are like, to quote Tennyson, clasping crooked crags, and they're just living off cliffs, and they're beautiful, they're gorgeous. It's a extreme viticulture, so you got to support those poor people as much as you can.
Yeah.
And but the wines are great. The wines are lovely, and they're high in acids, so they're fresh. They're very food friendly. They're not high in alcohol, and they've got also 13 different native grape varieties, 14 now. So yeah, it's fantastic, and it's beautiful. It's the Alps. It's beautiful. It's the Alps, mountains, snow-capped mountains, waterfalls when there's no drought. It's really beautiful, and there's the occasional bear, wolves, eagles,
Wow.
hawks. So it's great. It's fantastic.
Beautiful. Everyone, right, get your passports. Now I'm going to slowly bring it back to Barolo. So,
All right.
in your personal opinion, traditional or modern style Barolo, do you have a preference?
I'll tell you, and this is actually a great question. So thank you. I think it's good when people talk about traditional and modern because it puts things into a framework that is easy to understand. And I think, the problem with wine, Janina, you do this all the time, so it's hard. Wine can be remarkably complex for such a simple drink. And for such an easy thing to like, it can be really complex. And I think sometimes we scare people off, right? So to talk about Barolos in a traditional and in a modernist sense, it's easy. Traditional Barolos theoretically aged in big oak barrels, the modernists small oak barrels. But in fact, and this is the point, that distinction really isn't apt anymore, because over the last 20, 25 years, the traditionalists have picked up modernist vibes, and the modernists have started using traditional. There's very, very, very few true modernists left. There's a few more traditionalists left, probably because, and this is something that, I have to be careful how I say it because I don't want it to be taken the wrong way, but traditional winemaking is probably the best thing to do with Barolo. The modernist thing of not having much skin contact, for example, reducing it even to 10 days, was probably a mistake. I mean, honestly, there are many modernist Barolos made from very great years, like 1990s, that just haven't held up, and they've never become as complex as they should have been. However, what the modernist mantra held, and it was very important, because I think the traditionalists had been resting a little on their laurels, the modernists, it really is a lot more than just barrel size. What the modern or roto macerators, what the Baroloists from the modern ilk did, first of all, is reduced yields. And secondly, they did away with bad, dirty old barrels and they brought in small ones. So the modernist importance isn't so much in the winemaking per se, as much as to what they did to Barolo at a time when, yields were rampant, the barrels were old and dirty. So the very important contribution. So both are very important. And I think today, really, there's a mix of both with very few examples of one camp or the other.
Beautiful answer. I mean, I was hoping you were going to go somewhere down that
Would you
way,
like
and
me to
it's
repeat
basically.
it was
Oh,
that
sorry.
beautiful.
Yeah, sorry. Actually, I wasn't listening. Can you do that again? No. Right. Well, so that is an interesting conversation because it is really something that people don't necessarily always understand, modern versus traditional. Another one that perhaps I'd love for you to talk about more is Barbaresco. We often say, "Oh, Barbaresco is a softer Barolo. Oh, it's more feminine. Oh, what does this mean? Is this description even true?"
That's a great question, and I thank you for that because, yeah, Barbaresco often gets seen as the child of a lesser god, and it's a shame, right? It's a shame because it really isn't like that. Now, okay, you think of the Impressionists, you have Monet, Renoir, Manet, everybody knows them, everybody loves them, but there were some, shall we say, minor Impressionists like Sisley that were fantastically talented, and I would kill to have a Sisley in my house. So I think that it's never a matter of more or less talent. It's just really a matter of differences. Now, Barbaresco is really a different wine from Barolo. So to consider one, often I've seen written that Barolo is the king or the emperor and Barbaresco is
The
the queen or
queen.
the
Yeah.
empress. But that's really wrong. Besides the fact that it's just sexist, it's just wrong because it's not like that. They are completely different wines. They have in common that they are made with the same grape and that they're made literally 30 minutes from each other, but they are remarkably different wines. So the main difference, and it explains the raison d'etre of Barbaresco, is first of all, Barbaresco is made much closer to the Tanaro River. So Barolo and Barbaresco are essentially right bank wines. They are on the right bank of the Tanaro River. But the Barbaresco denomination is smaller than Barolo, much smaller, and it is much closer to the river. That means that the Barbaresco denomination has, for the most part, a very strong influence of the Tanaro River, which means the heat conserving and the heat releasing ability of water. So the grapes in Barbaresco bask in a warmer meso and macro climate, such that the harvest in Barbaresco almost always takes place a week to 2 weeks before Barolo. That's not a matter of quality. It's not a matter of one thing being better than the other. It's just because of the reality of the climate there. The second thing is the hills in Barbaresco are generally lower lying and more gentle in slope. So again, it's a gentler micro, meso, and macro climate for the grapes to grow in. The third thing is that the soils of Barbaresco are for about 80% of the type that give you faster maturing Nebbiolo wines. These are soils that are blue-gray marls. The specific geological term is they're called saved agates marls. And these are soils that will give you Barolos that are Barbarescos and Barolos that are ready to drink sooner, already 5, 10, 15 years, and they're ready to go. While 20% is a soil that was born in another geologic age. The lithology of that soil is called Lequio Formation. And these are compacted sands. They're yellowish, gray, reddish, and they are basically compacted sands with lots of limestone, give you much tougher Nebbiolo wines that really need 10, 12 years to be ready to drink and will live even longer. But, both these Nebbiolo wines are going to live 40, 50 years with no problem. Any Barolo, any Barbaresco that you get from either type of soil, from a very good vintage like, 1947 or 1961, that has been well kept in a good cellar, is going to be beautiful today, just like a Bordeaux. So, it's always relative when you say faster maturing, earlier drinking, because these are wines that can age forever, and just they are a little softer and a little less tannic. Because Barbaresco, and I finish, because Barbaresco is more gently tannic, the law recognizes that and demands that the Barbaresco only has to be aged for 1 year in oak rather than the 2 of Barolo, because Barbaresco doesn't need that oaky support. And the way people always have a hard time recognizing blind the Barolo and Barbaresco, and they try to look at the color and they try the smells, and the easiest way is just to look at the texture, to mouthfeel the texture. And the Barbarescos are just much lighter on their feet. They're more graceful, and you can tell them right away apart from the Barolos. The Barolos are just more tannic. Again, it's not one is better than the other, but they're different. I mean, do you like Monet or do you like Picasso? Do you like Tintoretto or do you like Kandinsky or Pollock? They're all great artists, but they're different. Do you like Beethoven, Wagner, or do you like Mozart? I mean, they're completely different.
Well, see, it's interesting. You've kind of gone into detail about the soils and a little bit more about the climate and the terroir of Barbaresco. If we went over to Barolo, my simple understanding of Barolo is almost you can kind of split Barolo into two very simply because of the soil types. And actually, I feel like the two soil types you described for Barbaresco are the two soil types still for Barolo. Or have I got that wrong?
No, of course not, Janina. You're totally right. And that, to make it easy, Barbaresco has an 80-20 mix, 80 in favor of the early maturing soils and 20 of the wines made from late maturing soils. In Barolo, it's more 50-50. So right away, that helps you understand why Barolos are going to be bigger and tougher. That's one of the reasons. Also because, territories of the communes like Serralunga and Monforte in Barolo are very far removed from the Tanaro. And so that's the reason why. In fact, again, we want to make wine simple. We don't want to make it too complicated. When I do my courses in my school, of course, we go into a lot more detail. But in general, it's not totally wrong to say that Barolo can be divided into 2 major soil types. In reality, it's 4, but we don't need to be so complicated. It's 2 is a good start to understanding.
Yeah, don't scare everyone off.
No,
just
no.
Just
we
yet.
don't want to do that.
Well, okay, everybody listening, please take a seat. Is everybody sitting? Okay, because Ian, apparently there's not just one single grape of Nebbiolo. There are different biotypes.
Yeah.
And you said this whole episode could probably be on just that, right? So, yeah, I mean, talk to me about this.
It's my favorite topic in the world, It's my favorite topic in the world, and I could really talk about it for hours.
Okay.
And, the trick, it's just so fascinating. And at first it can seem a little geeky or maybe a little esoteric, but in fact it's not. And human nature being what it is, human beings are curious by nature. Just ask any parent who's got a 3-year-old what he wants to do with his fingers and the electric socket. Oh, gee, there's a hole. Let's see what happens. Not a good idea, buddy.
Uh-huh.
Let's plug that socket right up here. So
Uh-huh.
we're curious. So we like to learn and we like to. So the biotype thing is, the bottom line is, first of all, Nebbiolo, there are many different Nebbiolos, just like there are many different Pinot Noirs. They're all Nebbiolo, they're all Pinot Noirs, they're all Chardonnays. But because they live in specific habitats, they adapt to those habitats over centuries, over decades, over years. And they have to, or they wouldn't survive. The whole point of evolution is animals adapting, plants adapting to the area they live in, so they're better suited to living in that area. If you take a polar bear to the Sahara, the poor thing's gonna die because he has no hope of surviving there. If you take somebody wearing a bathing suit to the North Pole, well, they're not gonna make too well. They're not gonna do too well either because they can't survive there without a coat of some kind. So plants and animals, they adapt to their environment, and because the Nebbiolo has grown in different parts of Italy over time, it has adapted, and there are many different subtypes, if we will, or subvarieties of Nebbiolo, biotypes. And Nebbiolo has at least 40 well-known biotypes. Most have been eliminated over time because they had problems. In fact, up until the 1980s, early 80s, there were four main biotypes available. Now, one of them, Bolla, has pretty well disappeared. And of the other three, one we now know to be a distinct variety. It is Nebbiolo's closest relative, but it is a distinct variety, and that is what they still call it Nebbiolo Rosé. Historically, everybody thought there were three main Nebbiolo subvarieties planted, and they were Nebbiolo Lampia, Miquette, and Rosé. And now that's changed because we know that Rosé is a distinct variety, but it's very similar to Nebbiolo. As its name implies, it gives you a lighter colored wine, a more perfumed wine, less tannin, Rosé-like. Miquette is a virus-affected form of Lampia that gives you a much darker, much meatier, much more concentrated wine. And Miquette was very, very popular back in the 70s and 80s when yields were high and you needed to make a more concentrated wine. So everybody was planting Miquette. Now that everybody understands that yields have to be lower, and Lampia is a very, very good Nebbiolo, everybody uses Lampia because it has less problems with climate change. So the majority of Nebbiolo wines you'll drink are made with Lampia, maybe 75%, 25% are Miquette, 20% are Miquette, and 5% are Nebbiolo Rosé. But that mix actually makes Nebbiolo that much more interesting. And you can't tell them apart. And if we'd had the discussion 15 years ago or 10 years ago, Rosé had really gone the way of the Dodo or the saber-toothed tiger, because clearly people didn't want to make light, elegant, graceful wines because they wouldn't sell, they weren't getting high scores, everybody wanted to make jam, not wine. And so Nebbiolo Rosé was getting uprooted left and right. Now it's coming back with a vengeance because Nebbiolo Rosé is actually more drought resistant and more heat tolerant than Nebbiolo Lampia. So in fact, it would be a good variety to have more of in the vineyards now, but basically everybody uprooted it. So now they're scrambling to find it. And so, Mother Nature always knows best. I just want to finish this thing just to help people get a perspective. Nebbiolo has 40 subvarieties, actually has a lot more, but they've been all lost, but 40 for sure. But in fact, Pinot Noir has about 500. They've done research. A group of producers in Burgundy have gone and sourced Pinot Noir in the Burgundy vineyards, and they've been able to find over 500 different Pinot Noir biotypes, and they even classified them in 3 levels, superior, fin, and très fin, and they're different. They're all Pinot Noir, but they're three main classes. And Chardonnay, there's over 300. So we tend to think of one Chardonnay, one Pinot Noir, one Nebbiolo, one Cabernet Franc. But in fact, it's not like that. And, that is intuitive. If you plant even Cabernet Franc in Mendoza, where it's very sunny and you're 3,000 meters up, and you plant it in Bordeaux, where it rains and you've got a continental climate, you would expect the thing to adapt to those different terroirs over time and give you different plants. If they give you different plants, they're going to give you different wines.
Yeah.
Honestly,
They lose you.
not at all. It's logical, and we do talk about Pinot Noir clones of all of these different sub-varieties or different biotypes. Pinot Noir has got the attention. And it is crazy that when Pinot Noir and Nebbiolo are two grape varieties that are seen as some of the best grape varieties in the world and are really terroir adaptable, yet nobody talks about Nebbiolo having all these different clones, these different biotypes. So it's just, I find it fascinating. It's totally obvious. It's totally logical. Yet why does no one talk about it? Why? Is it because Barolo itself, with all of its communes, is confusing enough? Everyone's like, ignore that point.
No, that's a really good question. It's a slightly difficult question to answer in a completely straightforward manner. The easy answer is that they never did the research in Barolo.
Okay.
Even the discovery that Nebbiolo Rosé is a different, distinct variety is really only born of university data from 2000 and 2004, so hardly even 25 years ago. They weren't aware so much. And also the three major biotypes, actually two biotypes and one distinct variety, are so similar. That's why everybody thought what they call clones, but it's wrong. Those are not at all clones. But you can understand why they thought they were more or less the same, and so they were okay with it. And then also, like I say, in the 80s, we lived through a time where everybody wanted to make black, big wines. So Nebbiolo Rosé really was not very popular. So they were substituting it left and right. So you have to understand them. What are they going to tell you now? They got rid of a grape that is actually better suited to heat, better suited to drought. So nobody really wants to talk about it too much, and except that they're trying to bring it back. And there are producers making Nebbiolo wines from 100% Nebbiolo Rosé, and it's great that it's coming back, and it should come back, and it's great. And we all learn, right? I mean, nobody ever really talked about these things. I'm actually the first one to have written chapters on Nebbiolo Rosé in something like 3 or 4 books. All the data available really comes from a few university papers and my research over 20, 25 years. So in my book, Barolo Terroir, I actually have a table of which producers in the Barolo denomination have Nebbiolo Rosé. To the best of my knowledge, that has never been done before. And granted, it shouldn't even be me doing it, right? I'm just a single individual moved by passion, but it should be other people with the means by which to do that. And, it's tough, we just have to be happy that there is a realization on the part of producers and wine-loving public that there are these differences, that they're not just geeky differences and that the wines are just for geeks, but they speak of different realities in different places. And it's interesting because they give you a different drink. And like I say, soft drinks are great, but they're all the same. The beauty about wine is there's many different facets for many different reasons. The more reasons we have, the more facets we're going to have, and the more things to talk about and the more things to enjoy. And I finish this just by saying, wine is not just what people who don't like wine or don't like alcohol will often say, oh, well, these people are just getting drunk. In fact, no, there's an intellectual, a cultural approach to wine. It's a really beautiful field of study even. And clearly you can study it in universities, but you can even do it at the table with your friends. And you can say, wow, this wine really is very citrusy. I wonder why that is. Well, it's probably because it comes from limestone soil. And this one's very spicy. Well, maybe because it comes from granite soil. And so it's really funny. It's really interesting. And there's a lot more. Like I always say, there's a lot more in a glass of wine than just a glass of wine.
I feel your passion. You are giving me every explanation as to why you've written so many books. But actually, you touched on, and thank you, your Barolo Terroir book. Everybody, there will be links in the show notes to these books. And so thank you for actually listing these different biotypes, because it's always the question people are listening. Oh, right, you're talking about it, but what do we do with this information, or how do we find out? So that's amazing. But you've got an upcoming book, which is Barbaresco Terroir. I think then the full title, Grapes, Crus, People, Places. Everyone,
wow,
there you go.
Congratulations.
Again. All in here. So what surprised you most whilst researching Barbaresco for this book?
Well, first of all, let me just say that these 2 books I actually co-wrote with a very good friend. His name is Michele Longo, and I've known him for 20 years now, and he's really a dear friend. Over the years, we decided when we start writing some books together, and we do. So the Barolo Terroir is a d'Agata and Longo book, and so will be Barbaresco Terroir. Barbaresco Terroir, was really not meant to be, because originally we set out wanting to write a book on Barolo and Barbaresco. But as we were going through it, we realized it was impossible, because the book would have ended up being like over 1,000 pages and impossibly heavy. I mean, the good thing, I guess, people could have stopped buying a pass to the gym, because all they needed to do was lift the book every day 50 times, and they got all the exercise they needed. But we didn't want to make a coffee table book, one that, like in titanium. So we decided to split them in two. So first Barolo Terroir, which is still like 500 pages, and now Barbaresco Terroir, which will be a little shorter because Barbaresco is a smaller denomination, and there's fewer crus and there's fewer wines. But yeah, hopefully by next April we'll have it out. And the work comes, you do it together. It just the different approach and the different outlook that Barbaresco producers have, and the perspective they have on their land and what they need to do to make the best possible Barbaresco. It's a different mindset from the Barolo people, even though the wines are fairly similar. Each one brings something of their own experiences, their own memories, their own present day lives to making their wines. And it's always very interesting and always very different.
But you said mindset, a slightly different mindset. Let me prod you that little bit further. Do you think collectively, as a group of Barbaresco producers, there is a slight different take or a different attitude to Nebbiolo than in Barolo? Do you feel it?
Yeah, no, I think so. I think they realize that they're going to make faithfully a more graceful wine. So when they make their wine, when they cultivate their grapes, they have to think that because they're going to be making a more graceful wine, they have to express that gracefulness, or maybe even hike it up to a max. So their mindset is different, because they're not trying to make the biggest, most tannic, brawniest wine around, and therefore they will take measures to have the elegance, refinement, and gracefulness come out. And sure, there are some Barbarescos that are very big and brawny wines, but the majority are not quite that big and brawny.
So you mentioned earlier that you do run your wine academy, and we're talking obviously about, imagine a blind tasting of Nebbiolo, and you've got your Barolo versus Barbaresco. You've already said, look out maybe for the texture. If the tannins are much softer and certainly less use of oak, that could lead you towards Barbaresco. Is there anything else, any practical exercises or tasting approaches that you would personally say to your students to help them truly understand Nebbiolo and its terroir?
I think there's different factors in terroir that will influence the wine in your glass. Now, to make it easy, we're just going to say we're talking about wines that are all made in the same way, because of course, if you consider the human element, boy, that's a whole other kettle of fish, because you can throw so many monkey wrenches into the mechanisms. So let's say if we're comparing wines that are made in the same way, more or less, I think that the soil is, to me, it's the single most important factor. Other people in Barolo and Barbaresco, and I've met many, will tell you that it more has to do with exposure and altitude, and that's a perfectly fine point of view. If you're making a Nebbiolo wine from grapes that are grown at 500 meters, very different wine from one made at 250. And if you're using a fully south or southwest facing vineyard, that's going to be a riper, richer, higher in alcohol wine than a wine made even in the same area, but facing southeast. That will be a cooler climate sort of wine. So I think the first thing is to have a basic understanding of the soil types, because that really, really does help you. I mean, there's no doubt that a wine made from the Lecchio formation, these soils that were created during the Ceravalian stage about 15 million years ago, 14 million years ago, they're very steely wines. They're very nothing like the softer or gentler wines of the territory of Verduno, which is one of the 11 communes in Barolo, that actually has the lightest soil, and therefore those wines just going to have a totally different mouthfeel. And then you combine that knowledge with the potential altitudes, the exposures, the grape type, because like I say, if you have a wine that is made with 80% Nebbiolo Rosé and one that is made with 80% Nebbiolo Miquette, they will be totally different independently of everything else. And so you put all that together and you're like sort of a detective, you're putting together the various clues. And then after you've done all that work and you're maybe testing 12 or 10 wines, you still get it all wrong. It's so hard. Mm-hmm. It's just so hard. But, practice makes perfect. Practice makes perfect. So, go out there and drink.
Responsibly. But
of course. Grab a couple of friends and
share a bottle. Fun. You've just said, we're talking about soils and understanding aspects. First of all, can I just ask, you said about 250 meters up to 500 meters. Is that the norm? That is the low and the high pretty much of where Nebbiolo is going to be planted, just for anybody?
Yeah, pretty well. I mean, it can be lower, it can be higher, but 250 to 500 is probably like 95%. Yeah.
Okay. But you've mentioned just now that there are 11 communes. But recently, there was the new map of MGAs. So tiny little sites now based on their terroir. And I believe when I was looking online, there's 181 of these. Am I right? Or is there more now?
No, you're doing totally fine. Okay. Congratulations. Here, you can have my seat.
Yay! Yeah. But
Let me interview you.
Yeah. Great. Well, I've just said that there's 181 little tiny areas called MGAs to learn about, and I know nothing about any of them. So I'll hand that seat back to you.
Well, no. So in Barolo, there's 11 communes, and in Barbaresco, there are 4. So again, Barbaresco is a much smaller denomination. These communes have territories that are subdivided in cru areas, what they will call MGAs, or the Italian word is menzioni geografiche aggiuntive, which literally means menzioni is a label, geografica, geographic, aggiuntiva, add-on, an add-on. So it's a Barolo with an added geographic label. And that added geographic label is let's say, the cru, which can be, Brunate or Vignarionda or Villero. And so you have those. So each commune has a certain number of MGAs. Depending on how big the territory is, you will have more, you will have less. And so with Barolo, you have the 11 communes. And the good thing is the communes are really pretty closely associated with those 2 basic, but in reality 4 major soil types. And so, Verduno and Serralunga are really at the 2 extremes. And La Morra and Barolo, Castiglione Falletto, Monforte have different degrees of one or the other soils. So if you know a wine is from Verduno, you pretty well know what to expect. If you know a wine is from Serralunga, you know what to expect. And then there's crus within each territory, and each cru has its characteristics. The main thing about Barolo and Barbaresco is that people who love wine have no problem talking to you about the differences between the Premier and the Grand Crus of Burgundy. So if you talk to a wine lover who really, really collects wine, drinks wine, he can tell you all the differences in the world between a Chablis from Les Clos and a Chablis from Valmure. Those are 2 different Grand Crus. If you have somebody who loves red Burgundies, they can tell you all about the differences between Chambol, Musigny, Les Amoureuses Vineyard, and Charme Vineyard, or Mazy Chambertin as opposed to Charme Chambertin, as opposed to Griotte Chambertin, and Latricière Chambertin, so on and so forth. So they can do that for Burgundy, and they can do that with Bordeaux, Margaux, Pauillac. They can pretty well do that. But they can't do that yet with Barolo and Barbaresco. But that's perfectly understandable. It's perfectly okay, because we really got these identifications, these MGAs, these crus officially certified only at the end of the first decade of 2000. And so it's been a very, short time. At first, they just came up with the names of the crus, and that made it very, very difficult. Nowadays, there's more of a push to have the crus associated with the commune, which makes it much, much easier. In fact, Now there is also the Barolo, for example, of the commune. So you have a regular Barolo, if you want to call Barolo regular, or a classic Barolo. And then the next step is the Barolo del comune del of, comune, commune, di of. So the Barolo of the commune of Serralunga, Novello, Barolo, La Morra. And that makes it very easy because that's already more reconducible to a specific terroir. And then you just got to remember the major crus in each commune. And sure, you can't remember 170. That's crazy. But you can, there's 15 or 20. Most people in Burgundy only remember a bunch anyways,
Well, honestly, thank you for just giving a little bit of reassurance. So I would say what I'm learning from this, everyone, is there is 11 communes. If you want to go deeper, just get an idea of what each one of them offers. And then once you find one you like, maybe start exploring a little further into those individual crus, the MGAs within that commune.
To make it very simple, there's a commune called Castiglione Felletto. It's located right in the center of the denomination. And it's sort of the heart of the Barolo denomination. We often tend to say that the Barolos of Castiglione Felletto are some of the most balanced. Don't know if that's true, but because of its position, it tends to have that rep. So there's 3 very famous crus in Castiglione Felletto. There's many more. Villero and Monprivato and Rocche di Castiglione. You can learn all the other ones. There's another very good one called Fiasco. But if you remember those 3, Villero, Rocche di Castiglione, and Monprivato, you've already got 3 of the most famous crus in Castiglione Felletto. So if you can focus on those, and then once you've got those down, you can move on to the other ones. So it's not so hard. I mean, it just takes a little time and practice.
Exactly. Well, okay, as we slowly start summing up, if somebody does want to start collecting, they're thinking about, right, I want to hold something back. Is there a few current vintages that you think right now would be great to grab and store? What's your opinion right now?
Yeah, no, I think it's a good moment because Barolo and Barbaresco have been blessed with some really good vintages of late. So just the very recent ones, 15, 16, 19, and 21 are 4 really amazing vintages. 16, 19, and 21 will live forever. 15 is a little bit riper and a little bit readier to drink. So you can drink those before the other ones are ready. But those 4 are great. And you can build a cellar with bunches of wines of those 4 vintages. And you're set. And frankly, your children are set too, because
think about the children.
20 years from now, they're going to be very, very good. They're already good now.
So that's for the future. What about now? We're thirsty. We want something beautiful. It's a special occasion. What older vintage are we going to grab and open today?
I think if you want to drink something that's ready to drink, again, it depends also on what your personal preferences are and what your palate are like. I always ask people what kind of wines you like, what kind of wines do you drink, so I get an idea before I open my mouth and make a fool of myself. But for example, if you like steely wines, if you like higher acid wines, something a little bit more vibrating and graceful, 2008 and 2013 are higher acid wines. But clearly, if you like fleshier, richer, creamier wines, those 2 vintages are not for you because they are sharp and tapered and steely wines. They're beautiful. I think they're fantastic, but not everybody's cup of Barolo, if you will. So if you want something a little richer and creamier and riper, I would say 2004 and 2012 would be readier to drink now.
Beautiful. And I guess some people listening, many people listening, will be like, well, that would be lovely to buy a Barolo that's 20 odd years old. I don't have that money. I want to try some Nebbiolo that's going to give me the best value in Piemonte. So where are we going? Are we going to get a Nara? Are we just going to get a Lang, Nebbiolo, Valtellina? Where there's so many regions actually within Piemonte that does Nebbiolo. Where do you think who's doing it great? Tell us the inside secret.
No, I mean the one good thing is there's a lot of very good Nebbiolo producers in Italy, and so you'd have to be really unlucky to pick something. I mean, it's like
Horrid.
everything in life. Some people may be a bit more talented than others, and some people have more elbow grease than others. But for the most part, the wines are really great. Nebbiolo Langhe, like you say, is a very good introduction to Barolo and Barbaresco. And the easy thing to do there is to just pick a producer you like. So, for example, there are some producers that make excellent Nebbiolo Langhe. They make excellent Barolos. They make excellent Barbarescos. So their Nebbiolos are really very, very good. I don't know if you want names or something, but I can certainly
You can
give you a
name.
bunch of names.
You can name.
Sandrone, for example, is a world-famous Barolo producer, but they make an outstanding Nebbiolo, which comes actually from the left bank of the Tanaro River in a denomination called Roero, and they source their grapes from what is the greatest Grand Cru of all Roero. It's called Valmaggiore. And so Sandrone is a very talented producer, plus he gets grapes from what is a true Grand Cru. So, of course, they're Nebbiolo Langhe. Another producer is called Bruno Giacosa. It's actually his daughter now making the wines, Bruna, lovely lady. And Bruna Giacosa makes a fantastic Nebbiolo from Valmaggiore again. So you see, there is a somewhereness in wines that's so beautiful that speak of a specific site. But there's many, many other Nebbiolo wines that are going to be great, and you really, really can't go wrong. Anywhere from, also they don't have to be super expensive wines. So Viberti, Marchesi di Barolo, Sordo, Scarzello. These are less known producers, but they make lovely, lovely Nebbiolo wines. So to answer your question, one way that you can buy a good Nebbiolo without breaking the bank is just be aware of which producers make a good Barolo, and chances are their Nebbiolo wines are also going to be very good. Often, those Nebbiolo wines are actually made with grapes that could be used to make Barolo, but maybe the vines are too young, and the producer doesn't want to use those young vines to make his Barolo or her Barolo, and therefore we'll just declassify it and call it a Nebbiolo, but you're getting a really, really good wine to begin with. And the other places you mentioned, Valtellina, the Val d'Aosta, they all make Nebbiolo wines, but they're going to be different. Valtellina and Val d'Aosta are high mountain alpine areas, so they're higher acid, less body, less creaminess, beautiful perfume. So if you like that, I totally recommend Valtellina and Val d'Aosta wines, or the wines of Alto Piemonte, like Gattinara and Carema and Lissona. They're absolutely beautiful wines, always pale red, high acidity, vibrating. They really dance on your taste buds. Lots of rose, lots of sour red cherry, cranberry, the cinnamon, the minerals. It's just beautiful wine. Hard not to like.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Ian. You are such a fountain of knowledge, and I am only stopping this now because, don't want to go over an hour, but my gosh,
Been an hour?
I'm like, it's almost.
Oh my gosh. Okay, I'm sorry. I talked too much.
You do not talk too much. And this was such an inspiring chat that I think everyone, hopefully, is going to feel, excited to go and get themselves another Nebbiolo. But if they've never even experienced it, now is just going to be a wonderful adventure with a little bit of advice to take them down that route. So thank you so much.
I really thank you for that. It's very kind of you to say that. And, when you use the word inspiring, that makes me so happy. It actually honors me, because if I inspire younger people to fall in love with wine or specific wines, it makes me very happy. And, you were talking about biotypes. And I couldn't believe it when I got a message a few months ago here in Shanghai, where I live. A couple of ex-students of mine have opened a wine bar, and they called it Biotype in my honor. So what can I say? I've inspired them, hopefully in the right way.
Yes.
And I'm honored by that, and I'm happy by that. And if people have listened to your, wonderful podcast today and get something out of it, then I'm happy to have helped them, help you, and help wine in general.
They certainly will. So thank you, Ian. I cannot wait for us to share a glass or two
Thank you very much.
of Nebbiolo together. So thank you.
When I'm next in London, we raise a glass together.
Yeah, we will. Thank you. See you soon. If you have made it to the end of the episode, you deserve a treat. And thank you to the lovely Ian, who has made 2 tickets available to those of you listening that are not working in the trade. So these are 2 exclusive passes
for 2 of you who will get the chance to attend an incredible masterclass on Italian wine with Ian himself and peek into the wine world like you've never seen it before. It is happening on the 20th of April in London. And to enter, just email me at janina@eatsleepwinerepeat.co.uk with the text win Italian wine tickets. You'll have until 9th of March to enter, and I will email the 2 winners with all the details you'll need. And of course, I'll be there too, and I cannot wait to meet 2 of you in person. All this information is again going to be in the show notes. And speaking of exciting wine adventures, next week we're talking Spanish wine with Ellie Scott, a Spanish wine specialist who's just returned from Barcelona Wine Week. She'll be sharing the grape varieties that made her think, why aren't we talking about this more? Her favourite 5 wines from the hundreds she's tasted, and so much more. Now, as always, I like to leave you with a little wine quote, and said by many, Barolo is the king of wines and the wine of kings. So, wine friends, whatever you're drinking this week, take a moment to enjoy it, explore something new, and remember that wine is about curiosity, pleasure, and connection. And if these episodes are helping you connect that little bit more with wine, please do leave a review, rating, or stars on the podcast app you're listening to, as it really helps the podcast be found by more wine lovers like yourself. Love and light to you all. Until next Monday, wine friends, cheers to you.